Siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha. 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 Amandla.
Welcome to Andile Mngxitama podcast. We ask you to please subscribe. We're trying to reach the 20,000 subscriptions by the end of the year. We have not done too badly. We thank you for those of you who have subscribed, and we ask those of you who have not subscribed yet to please do so. It is important that we have subscription numbers that are growing so that we are clear and we have some evidence of the growth of this particular platform. Now today we're going to talk about a very controversial subject which has gripped the nation for too long: gender-based violence. How do we understand gender-based violence? How it has ideologically been used to mask the real sources of violence in the black community and demonization of the black man. In South Africa, annually, we murder 20,000 people annually. And of those, close to 18,000 are black men. And then the rest will be children and women. We are one of the highest murder countries in the world. Sometimes even countries at war do not generate these amounts of numbers. 20,000 annually is the number of black people that are murdered in South Africa. However, when this violence is looked at, only the 2,000 or so women and children become the face of violence, and it has been termed gender-based violence. And the perpetrator is presented as the black man. Well, the truth of the matter is that the black community is at war with itself. In particular, the black men are murdering each other. And in fact, women and children can be seen as collateral damage in this permanent war which is going on in the black community. The real question which is not being asked is, who is responsible for creating the conditions that creates this perpetual war in the black community? Steve Biko provides a very clear, succinct exposition of what are the sources of the violence in the black community. He says the rapes, the murders, the violence which are happening in the black community, their source is the white community, which lives in peace and harmony, enjoying life in the country, including, suntanning in the beaches of this country. Steve Biko directs us to the source of the mayhem which is continuing in the black community. The source is the white society. So how is that? Well, like all oppressed people in the world, if you go to Australia and you look in terms of the violence against women and children and against even the men themselves, in the Aboriginal communities, you will see the numbers are shocking. Not only that, you will see the same pattern of black men committing suicide, black oppressed people committing suicide. The suicides, for instance, numbers between black men and black women in this country are disproportional. Black men kill themselves in really high numbers. This is the outcome of a patriarchal society and a racist society which is anti-black. The black man is operating within a system of patriarchy which suggests that he's supposed to be a man. But all the means of being this man are removed from them. And therefore they turn against themselves and against their children and against their women. That is how the oppressive system works. The oppressor on top oppresses the first layer, and the first layer oppresses the second and the third and the last. If you want to understand the sources of gender-based violence in this country, we have to look in the structure of society. How do black people live? What leads to the conflict which creates this violence, this shocking amount of violence? And then, of course, another part of the discourse is to, if you like, erase even situations where women themselves participate in the violence. Some statistics have shown that the violence against children and murders against children are perpetuated disproportionately by black women. But black women are also victims. However, the largest victims are black men who have been erased from the policy discussions, from sympathy. Black men have no sympathy at all. They get no sympathy at all because they are seen as the perpetrator. The perpetrator against themselves and the perpetrator against women and against children. Now, the white system has created this white feminist project, which is calibrated by the fear of the black man and the hatred of the black man. And this feminism has become the most dominant feminist project in the country. That is why, there was a shutdown once in support of a move against gender-based violence. The shutdown was also part of a mass demonstration. Black men were explicitly told they are not welcomed. Explicitly. But we saw white women participating in that march, including white men working as journalists were allowed into that space. But the black brother who was selling ice cream, he came into the end of the march in Pretoria, he was chased away. You see, this hyper representation of the men, black men as the problem, black men as the danger, black men as a source of violence is hegemonic in these processes that attempt to deal with gender-based violence. But the way they deal with this gender-based violence don't go to the root of the problem. As a consequence, creates an industry which at the top you see these elite spokespersons of this anti-violence industry who are well paid, who are actually working permanently as researchers, as lobbyists, and so on. We know that when they marched to the JSE, there was a meeting with the leaders of the movement, with the JSE leadership, where money was promised. Now, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange represents the economic force that perpetuates the anti-black, racist, exclusionary system. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange is the epitome that represents that. But they go there, they get money. So this money is again used to perpetuate the idea that the black man is the problem. However, the truth of the matter is that the black men and the black women in this country, which is racist, find themselves in the same side of the political divide. of the societal divide, of the economic hardships, which creates these points of crisis, points of tensions amongst black men and black women. The black man is expected to be a provider. That's what patriarchy says. But the black man is unemployed. So the black man takes the frustration of his inability to perform this patriarchal representation of the self against fellow black men and against the black woman. This construct of a man who provides is also colonial and racist, by the way. Take just on the land question. Under the African tenure system, land was a commodity shared by men and women. In some communities, such as the Nama, the woman was the actual controller of land. The man was the hunter. But the colonial system came and said, land belongs to the man, and created a serious conflict amongst both men and women, but took the land away, the source of life. And therefore, black men were forced to become servants. And you know how the colonial situation created the black man as the black boy. So, infantilization of the black man, whilst expecting him to operate in a patriarchal society that suggests that he's supposed to be the provider, but his whole real circumstance is that of a boy. Garden boys, mine boys, factory boys, and our mothers were infantilized as girls as well. So in the power structure of whiteness, the black man is simply reduced into a boy. And this boy is also presented as the problem. And this problem, of course, end up reproducing itself as the source of violence. But we need to understand what constructs the violence in the black community, what constructs the black man as this violent entity. The black man has lost his real position in society, and all what is left with is rage and a sense of exclusion and a sense of nothingness. And then they reproduce this reality, turn it into violence against themselves, black men, and affecting both children and women. But the creation of the violent black man is an outcome of the colonial and apartheid reality, which has put the black men in a position where they are basically nothing in society. But today, when the violence in the black community is analyzed, the black man is provided as a figure of violence, in fact, put in a position of being presented as if he's the oppressor, not a product of oppression. The violent black man, the black man who lashes out against himself and against the child and the woman, is a black man which is a creation of the white system through alienation of the self from the means of production, from the economic system. This life of anxiety which the black man has been thrown into has created him as this source of violence. But we are not going to stop gender-based violence without stopping the machine that produces the black man who is alienated, who is rejected, and who is presented as this perpetual danger. We have to deal with the system that produces this suffering and exclusion to be able to deal with gender-based violence in this country. There is mass murder going on. It is of genocidal proportion. Annually, we bury 20,000 black people, and the majority of which are black men, mostly young black men, in fact. And we know how it happens. In a weekend, two friends going out on a Friday, we know by Sunday, one of them is stabbed and there's a funeral. Stabbed by his own friend. So this violence has become so normalized in these spaces and so real that it's almost accepted kind of life. But when the state responds to this violence, it removes from responsibility the actual authors of the violence in the black community, which is the white community, which is benefiting from this exclusion and oppression of black people. And the oppressed amongst themselves end up fighting and killing each other because of a sense of powerlessness. I mean, sociologically and even psychologically, these things can be explained. The source of violence amongst the oppressed against each other is an outcome of their positionality of being oppressed. In fact, Fanon also shows that the oppressed, before they confront the oppressor, before they gain a consciousness that organizes them to fight against the oppressor, generate so much violence amongst themselves until a revolutionary consciousness is engendered and direction is given, an outlet of this violence of oppression is given direction towards the revolutionary process, towards the settler and the enemy. The oppressed will continue to hate themselves and continue to generate so much violence against one another. So part of dealing with gender-based violence is the understanding of its sources. Because if we don't go to the source, what creates this violent black man, we are not going to be able to end the violence in the black community. But the black man has become the easy representation of this violence, and all the campaigns are pitted against the black man, and the easy solution is to try to criminalize the black man. Of course, jailing perpetrators of violence is part of the superficial solution to the problem. But we have to stop the machine that produces the violent black man. And that is only possible through changing how society functions, is organized, and we socialize our men. The current socialization is one that says, as a black man, you are a provider. As a black man, you are the head of the family, and that goes with that. But society does not give you these chances in reality. You end up looking into yourself as a failure and generating anger, which you take out against those who look like you. Every weekend in the ghetto, we're killing each other because we're killing the thing that we hate, which is ourselves. And that self-hate is created by the structures of society which exclude us, marginalize us, make us helpless in a society which in fact has the means to make sure that we live in dignity, all of us. Until we look into the source of the oppression of black people and look into the source that turned the black man into the victim that is self-victimizing. Because that is what this gender-based violence is really about. It targets the black man predominantly. The black man is a man at war with himself because he is killing the thing that he hates, which is himself, precisely because he's put in that position by society that hates him, that put him at a position of being excluded. We have to turn that around. We have to bring real hope to black people and to black men. And when black men have real hope and they have real possibilities of reproducing themselves as meaningful members of society, we will see even a lot of the violence will certainly subside. Part of giving this meaningful identity to black men in this country, it is to make sure that they have real economic power and they are put out of the ghetto, put out of the suffering and marginalization which is there right now. And once their life are meaningful, they will have meaningful relationships as well with both women, children, and themselves. That is the solution, not this demonization of the black man through this gender-based violence industry and the anti-black men feminist industry, which is creating an elite spokesperson class layer which continuously produces this discourse which demonizes the black man without answering the source of the violence in the black community, without being able to stop that source of violence in the black community. But of course, the violence continues and it justifies the good life that can be generated out of monetarization of black suffering by projecting the black man as the problem. The black man is not the problem. The black man is a victim, just like the black child and the black woman are a victim in this anti-black society. Isolate.
Siyawuthatha umhlaba siyawuthatha. 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 Siyawuthatha umhlaba